There's a type of man women claim doesn't exist anymore. They say he's a fantasy, a relic, something Hollywood invented, but when he enters a room, something primal shifts. Conversations stall mid-sentence. Eyes track his movement like prey watching a predator. And the women who swore they wanted emotional availability, communication, and vulnerability suddenly forget every word they've ever said about what they desire. Schopenhauer saw this 2 centuries ago. He watched men grovel, perform, and optimize themselves into objects of pity rather than desire. He understood what you've been taught to deny. The man who desires nothing becomes everything desired. This isn't a dating strategy. This isn't about playing hard to get or manipulating outcomes. This is a metaphysical reality hardwired into the architecture of human attraction, hidden behind layers of social conditioning and comfortable lies. The man who cares least doesn't win because he's cruel. He wins because he embodies something women are biologically designed to chase. Not the man who needs to be chosen, not the man who waits for permission, the man who could walk away without a backwards glance and sleep soundly that same night. This man triggers something ancient, something that bypasses conscious choice entirely. And by the time you finish this, you'll understand why every relationship guru who told you to be more available, more expressive, more eager, was either ignorant or lying. Most of what you believe about attraction is backwards. The truth won't comfort you. It will strip away illusions you've been clinging to because admitting the alternative felt too cold, too harsh, too much like surrendering your romantic ideals. But illusions don't generate desire. They generate friendship, respect without attraction, the kind of relationship where she loves what you do for her but never craves who you are. What you're about to learn disturbs most men enough that they'll reject it outright. They'll call it toxic, cynical, or damaged. That rejection is a defense mechanism against a truth their ego can't absorb, that they've been the architect of their own invisibility. That every time they chased, explained, and proved themselves, they were broadcasting weakness at a frequency women's biology is designed to detect and avoid. Schopenhauer called it the will, the blind, unconscious force governing all selection, all survival, all desire. The will doesn't read your intentions. It doesn't reward your effort. It responds to one signal above all others: sovereignty. The capacity to exist entirely self-contained, requiring nothing external to validate your existence. This isn't loneliness dressed up as philosophy. This is the difference between the man women settle for and the man they can't stop thinking about. You're about to see the mechanics of desire from an angle that makes everything else you've learned look like children's stories. The kind of knowledge that once absorbed cannot be unlearned. You'll recognize the patterns everywhere. In her words, in her tests, in the way she responds to your presence versus your absence. And you'll never be the same man who started watching this. The question isn't whether this is true. Your experience has already confirmed it, even if your mind rejected the conclusion. The question is whether you're ready to stop performing and start embodying. Whether you can handle becoming the type of man who doesn't need her approval because he's discovered something more valuable than her validation. Stay with this. What comes next separates the men who understand power from the men who wonder why they keep losing. The illusion. Most men live. Look around you. Watch how men move through the world now. They've turned themselves into products competing for shelf space in a market they don't understand. Better career, better physique, better social skills. They study communication techniques like they're preparing for an exam. They learn to listen actively, express emotions clearly, demonstrate emotional intelligence. They believe if they just optimize enough variables, desire will follow like a mathematical certainty. This is the grand delusion, the performance trap that captures 90% of men and never releases them. You see it everywhere. The guy who does everything right on paper but watches her choose someone who does everything wrong. The man who's kind, stable, and present, but somehow never makes her pulse race. He's confused because he followed the formula. He became what she said she wanted, and now he's exactly where he started, alone or worse, in a relationship where he's valued but not desired. Here's what nobody told you. When you perform for validation, the performance itself becomes the message. And that message screams dependence. It announces that you need her assessment of you to feel complete, that her approval determines your worth. Women don't consciously process this. They don't sit down and think it through logically. Their biology reads it instantaneously and makes a judgment that bypasses rational thought entirely. This man is incomplete. Incompleteness repels at a level deeper than choice. You can't negotiate with it. You can't reason your way past it. The moment she registers you as someone who needs to be chosen, the game ends. Not because she's cruel or shallow, but because her evolutionary programming has one job: filter for sovereignty. For the man who exists in his own frame, who operates from internal drive rather than external validation, you think you're building attraction by showing interest, being available, proving your commitment. You're actually destroying it. Every text that comes too quickly, every explanation that goes too long, every moment where you react to her mood instead of maintaining your own. These aren't acts of love, they're confessions of dependence. And dependence doesn't generate desire. It generates the exact opposite. A vague sense of disappointment she can't quite articulate, but definitely feels. The tragedy isn't that you're not good enough. The tragedy is that your goodness is irrelevant to the mechanism that creates attraction. She doesn't want the man who needs to be chosen. She wants the man who could walk away without a second thought. Not because he's playing games, but because his life contains something more compelling than her attention. This is the filter nature built. And it's completely indifferent to your resume. What separates the performer from the sovereign? The performer optimizes for external metrics. The sovereign operates from internal mandate. One seeks validation. The other generates it. And women's biology knows the difference before a single word is spoken. Everything you thought you knew about building attraction just revealed itself as the reason you've been losing. Stay here. The next layer shows you what actually works and why it disturbs men who aren't ready to let go of comfortable lies. The will-driven man. Schopenhauer identified a rare archetype that exists outside the validation economy. The will-driven man. This isn't the man enslaved by desire, chasing women through apps and bars, seeking approval in every interaction. This is the man who operates from internal drive, immune to external assessment. He doesn't need women because he's found something more valuable, purpose that transcends the game entirely. Self-sufficiency isn't loneliness. It's not bitter isolation or resentful withdrawal. It's psychological sovereignty, the ability to be complete within yourself, requiring nothing external to feel whole. This man doesn't explain himself because explanations are negotiations for approval. He doesn't chase outcomes because outcomes don't determine his worth. He doesn't react to tests because tests only work on men who need to pass them. He doesn't need to be understood because understanding from others is optional, not essential. He exists in his own frame, unmoved, self-contained. And this creates a paradox that most men never grasp. The less he needs her, the more magnetic he becomes. Why? Because women's biological programming is designed to detect resource scarcity and emotional weakness with surgical precision. The moment you need her validation, she registers you as incomplete, deficient, fundamentally unattractive at a level that has nothing to do with your qualities and everything to do with your frame. But the man who is psychologically complete triggers the opposite response. Her biology reads sovereignty and interprets it as rare, valuable, worth pursuing. This isn't manipulation. It's not a tactic you deploy on Friday night. It's a state of being that radiates from every interaction because it's real. You can't fake self-sufficiency. Women have spent millennia evolving the ability to detect pretense. But when you genuinely don't need her response to feel complete, everything changes. This is where most men fail. They intellectually understand the concept, but emotionally remain desperate. They try to act indifferent while checking their phone every 30 seconds. They attempt to seem busy while their entire week revolves around her schedule. The performance betrays the dependence, and she feels it immediately. Becoming will-driven requires destroying the part of you that seeks validation from female attention. Not suppressing it, not managing it. Destroying it entirely by replacing it with something stronger. A mission that matters more than her opinion. A purpose that survives her absence. An identity that doesn't require her presence to feel real. What comes next reveals the behavioral blueprint of this archetype. The specific patterns that communicate sovereignty without a single word. Keep watching. The wounded king archetype. Think of the man who controls a room without raising his voice. Cold, calculating, silent. He doesn't prove his power because proof is what weak men offer. He doesn't explain his decisions because explanations are for people who need permission. Women orbit him, not because he's communicative or emotionally available, but because he represents something primal, the man who has conquered his own chaos. This is the archetype of controlled detachment. The man who has suffered, been broken, yet transformed that trauma into disciplined power. He doesn't leak emotion because emotion in his world is currency, and he doesn't spend it cheaply. His silence carries more weight than other men's speeches because scarcity creates value. When he speaks, people listen, not from fear, but from respect earned through restraint. Watch how he moves through conflict. Chaos erupts around him and he remains calm. Not pretending to be calm, actually calm, because he's seen worse. He's been through fire that would destroy lesser men, and it forged him into something harder. This is the wounded king, the man who carries scars he never discusses, pain he never weaponizes, and strength he never advertises. His authority doesn't come from effort, it comes from presence. He doesn't demand respect by being loud or aggressive. Respect is simply given because his frame is unshakable. When she tests him with emotional chaos, he doesn't engage. When she withdraws attention to see if he'll chase, he doesn't move. When she provokes to see if he'll react, he remains unmoved. Not because he doesn't care, but because he cares about something more valuable than passing her test, his sovereignty. Women don't consciously understand why this archetype attracts them. They can't articulate it at dinner parties or explain it to their friends. But their biology recognizes it instantly. It reads him as dangerous, rare, worth pursuing. Because a man who has conquered himself is a man who can protect, provide, and remain stable when everything else falls apart. This is emotional austerity as power. Strategic silence as dominance. Non-reactive presence as attraction. Most men talk themselves out of desire. This man creates it by refusing to perform. The next section reveals why his indifference isn't cruelty. It's the biological trigger that separates want from need. Stay focused. The dark mechanism of desire. Female desire doesn't work the way you were taught. It's not a conscious choice made after evaluating your qualities. It's a biological response triggered by unconscious cues your behavior broadcasts constantly. She doesn't decide who attracts her. Her nervous system decides for her based on patterns encoded across millennia of evolutionary selection, and those patterns care nothing about fairness or your intentions. When you over-explain, you signal insecurity. Your words say confidence, but your need to justify screams doubt. When you seek her approval, you signal low value. Men with options don't ask permission. When you react emotionally to her tests, you signal lack of control. When you chase her attention, you signal scarcity. Every one of these behaviors triggers the same biological response: rejection at a level she doesn't consciously control. Now reverse it. When you remain silent under pressure, you signal strength. Weak men fill silence with nervous explanations. When you don't need her response, you signal abundance. Men who chase don't have options. When you walk away easily, you signal that you have something better to return to. When you focus on your mission instead of her mood, you signal purpose. These aren't tricks. They're manifestations of genuine sovereignty. This is the mechanism most men never grasp. Attraction isn't built through addition, it's built through subtraction. Every time you don't chase, don't explain, don't react, you're creating space for her biology to fill with curiosity, with pursuit, with desire, because her evolutionary programming has one directive: secure the man who doesn't need securing, the man who could survive without her, the man whose life continues with or without her presence. The brutal truth that destroys comfortable illusions. Women don't fall in love with men who need them. They fall in love with men who could thrive without them. Neediness isn't endearing. It's repellent. It signals that you're incomplete, that she would be completing you, that your value depends on her choice. And nothing kills attraction faster than being needed by someone who has no other options. This isn't cruelty, it's biology operating according to ancient code. She's not choosing to feel this way. Her body is making assessments before her mind gets involved. By the time she's consciously thinking about whether she's attracted to you, the decision has already been made in systems she doesn't control. What comes next gives you the practical framework, the 3 pillars that transform understanding into embodiment. Don't skip ahead. The 3 pillars of sovereignty. Becoming the will-driven man requires foundations most men never build. 3 pillars that aren't optional, aren't negotiable, and can't be faked. Without them, everything you've learned remains theory. Intellectual understanding that crumbles the moment a woman you want tests your frame. First pillar, economic sovereignty. Master your resources. The man who controls his finances controls his freedom. This isn't about status or impressing anyone. It's about the ability to walk away from any situation without fear, to leave a job that disrespects you, to end a relationship that drains you, to choose your path without checking your bank account first. Money is freedom converted into currency. Without it, your sovereignty is theoretical. With it, your choices become real. Second pillar, philosophical depth. Develop a mind that cannot be manipulated. Most men are reactionary because they've never examined the beliefs controlling them. They absorb programming from society, media, women, and never question whether any of it serves them. Read, think, challenge every assumption you've accepted without scrutiny. The sovereign man thinks for himself. He doesn't outsource his worldview to others. He builds his own framework and operates from principles he's tested, not borrowed. Third pillar, physical mastery. Your body is the vehicle of your will. Train it, discipline it, not for female attention or social approval, but for self-respect. Physical weakness breeds mental weakness. When your body is soft, your mind follows. When you can't control your appetite, you can't control your impulses. When you avoid discomfort in training, you'll avoid it everywhere else. Physical discipline creates mental discipline. The man who masters his body demonstrates he can master anything. These aren't tips for getting women. They're foundations for becoming the type of man women pursue. The difference is everything. Tips are tactics. Foundations are transformation. One gets you temporary results. The other rebuilds your identity from the ground up. Without these pillars, you'll remain trapped in the performance cycle, forever optimizing for external validation you'll never receive, forever wondering why nothing works despite doing everything right. The answer is simple. You're building a house on sand. No amount of decoration changes the fact that the foundation doesn't exist. Next comes the crucible. The moment every woman uses to separate pretenders from embodiments. This is where most men fail without knowing they were being tested. The final test. Every woman will test the man who doesn't need her. Not because she's malicious, but because she has to know if your sovereignty is real or performed. She'll create chaos to see if you react. She'll withdraw attention to see if you chase. She'll provoke emotion to see if you break frame. This isn't manipulation. It's biological verification. She's asking a question your behavior will answer. Is this man actually sovereign, or is he pretending until I give him what he wants? The will-driven man doesn't take the bait. He remains calm when she's emotional, not dismissive, not cruel, just unaffected. Her storm doesn't become his storm. He stays absent when she's demanding, not to punish, but because his mission doesn't pause for tests. He remains indifferent when she's testing. Not cold, just unmoved. Because men who need to pass tests have already failed them. This is where pretenders reveal themselves. They hold frame for days, weeks, then crack the moment she applies real pressure. They were performing sovereignty, not embodying it. And the performance always breaks because it's exhausting to maintain something you're not. Real sovereignty doesn't require effort. It's not a mask you wear. It's who you are when nobody's watching. Watch what happens when she realizes she can't move you, that you're unmovable, that her emotional weather doesn't change your internal climate. The pursuit intensifies, not because you played the game correctly, but because you stopped playing entirely. You became the prize she's trying to earn, not the participant hoping to win her. This is the paradox Schopenhauer understood viscerally. The less you need her, the more she needs you, not want, need. Because rare things become valuable, and men who genuinely don't require female validation are the rarest resource in her world. Every other man she meets is negotiating for her approval. You're the only one who isn't. And that singularity makes you unforgettable. Most men fail here because they mistake indifference for cruelty. They think sovereignty means being cold or withholding. It doesn't. It means being complete. You can care about her deeply while not needing her desperately. You can invest in the relationship without requiring it to validate your existence. The difference is everything. When you pass this test, not by trying but by being, something shifts permanently. She stops testing and starts investing. Not because you won, but because she recognized something authentic, a man who actually doesn't need her, and paradoxically, that's exactly what makes her want to stay. The final choice comes next. Everything you've learned converges into one decision that determines whether this knowledge transforms you or just becomes another video you watched. Stay here. The choice. You have a decision to make right now, not tomorrow. Not after you think about it. Now. You can continue performing. Keep optimizing yourself like a product hoping to be purchased. Keep explaining, chasing, proving your value to women who will never truly desire you because the foundation of your approach guarantees failure. Keep living in the delusion that if you just do more, say more, show more effort, desire will suddenly appear. Or you can embrace the uncomfortable truth. The only path to genuine desire is through self-sufficiency. Through becoming a man so internally complete that female attention becomes optional, not necessary. A man whose life has meaning, purpose, and direction that exists independent of whether she texts back or not. This isn't about not wanting women. It's about not needing them to feel whole. Schopenhauer wasn't teaching you tactics to get women. He was teaching you how to transcend the need for validation entirely. Because the man who transcends that need becomes the exact thing women spend their entire lives searching for. A man who could walk away and be fine. A man who has something more valuable than her approval. A man who exists in his own frame and invites her into it rather than contorting himself to fit into hers. This is the wounded king, the man who has suffered, transformed that pain into power, and now moves through the world with quiet authority. This is the shadow warrior, the man who understands the game so completely he no longer needs to play it. This is the will-driven man, the man who operates from internal mandate rather than external validation. Now you know the secret. The question isn't whether this is true. Your own experience has already confirmed it every time you chased and lost, every time you were available and became invisible, every time you did everything right and she chose someone who did everything wrong. The question is whether you'll become this man, whether you'll do the work required to build the 3 pillars, whether you'll remain unmoved when she tests you, whether you'll choose sovereignty over performance. Most men won't. They'll watch this, nod along, maybe even feel inspired for a day or two. Then they'll return to the same patterns because transformation requires more pain than most are willing to endure. It requires killing the part of you that seeks validation. It requires building a life so compelling that women become an addition, not the foundation. It requires becoming comfortable with being alone so you're never desperate for company. But for the men who do, everything changes. Not overnight, not magically, but inevitably, because you become the type of man women chase instead of the type who chases. You become rare in a world full of performers. You become valuable in a market saturated with men seeking approval. You become desired because you embody the one thing that triggers desire, genuine indifference to needing it. The choice is yours. Will you become him, or will you remain a performer on someone else's stage? If this disturbed you, good. Comfort is the enemy of transformation. What you just absorbed isn't theory meant to make you feel better. It's reality meant to make you different. And if you're ready to go deeper, to understand the specific mistakes that destroy attraction before it even begins, subscribe now. The next video reveals the single biggest error men make in relationships. The one thing you think builds connection, but actually guarantees you'll be replaced. Most men will ignore this. They'll go back to performing, wondering why nothing changes. But you're not most men. You wouldn't have stayed this long if comfortable lies still satisfied you. So subscribe, because what comes next separates the men who understand these principles from the men who embody them. Until then, remember this: master yourself. Everything else follows.